I'm going to work through one of the early AQA specimen exam papers in this video, so it's worth stating that this has mostly been designed to help students prepare for the AQA Literature Paper 1 as it is in 2019, although anyone studying the play Macbeth will find it useful as I go through a particular extract from the play in quite a lot of detail and make links to other areas of the play as we go along. At the end of this video I go through an exam-style response and show you how to hit the assessment criteria and therefore maximise your chances of success. If you're not studying the AQA syllabus in 2019, you just need to be mindful of the expectations from your particular exam board. When you open your exam paper, you'll need to find the question set on Macbeth, and then you'll see a brief introduction to the task which has been set, which will look a bit like this. So you're told where the extract has been taken from. In this case, it's Act 1, Scene 5, and you get a bit of context. At this point in the play, Lady Macbeth is speaking. She's just received the news that King Duncan will be spending the night at her castle. The extract is then printed for you underneath. All of the current series of GCSE exam papers are closed books, so this is the only bit of the play that you'll have in front of you. You need to look at it closely and get as much out of it as you can. Underneath this printed extract, you'll be given the focus for the task you need to complete. And as I've said previously, it's vital that you take note of this. This task is not asking you to write everything you know about this scene or the play in general. The focus here is on Lady Macbeth, and in particular how she is presented by Shakespeare as a powerful woman. So everything you write needs to link back to this focus in some way. You also need to take note of the fact that the question asks you to write about how Shakespeare presents this character. You're not writing about Lady Macbeth as if she's a real person. You're writing about the techniques Shakespeare has used to present this character in the play and the reasons for this portrayal. Before we take a detailed look at the extract, it's worth reminding ourselves of the marking criteria for this section. This excerpt from the mark scheme is what the examiner will use to award you somewhere between 21 and 25 marks. You get 30 marks for how you respond to this task and an additional 4 marks for your technical accuracy. So if we're thinking about this response as being out of 30, then 21 to 25 marks is between 70 and 83% of the total, which based on the 2018 thresholds covers levels 7 all the way to the very top of level 8. And to get there, you need to respond to the question in a way which is thoughtful and developed. You need to embed or integrate quotations into the sentences that you are writing. You need to use subject-specific terminology effectively, make links to other relevant parts of the play, which is what the criteria means when it says the whole text. Show a clear understanding of contextual factors, such as the time that Shakespeare was writing or the genre of tragedy, and finally offer some alternative interpretations. So what is it that's happening in this extract? Well, we're told that Lady Macbeth has just received the news that King Duncan will be spending the night in her castle, but there are a couple of other factors that are important to remember at this point in the play. Firstly, that Lady Macbeth has just read a letter from her husband telling her about his meeting with the witches and the predictions that they gave him, and then the fact that Lady Macbeth has, just prior to this extract, been reflecting on the character of her husband and her belief that he is too kind to murder Duncan in order to become king. So in this speech, Lady Macbeth is calling out to the evil spirits in the world to make her more powerful and strong enough to plan the murder herself and then convince her husband to carry it out. Lady Macbeth begins by setting out the magnitude, the huge scale of what she's planning to do and therefore the strength and power she's going to need to do it. It begins with the image of a raven, which, if you've never seen one before, is a large black bird. Partly because of this appearance and the sound it makes, it's often associated with death and was believed to foretell of an approaching death. Lady Macbeth begins this speech by saying that there will be death which is on such a massive and significant scale in her castle this night that the raven will croak itself hoarse. This speech, like most others in Shakespeare's plays, is written in poetry and follows the rules of iambic pentameter, which means that the lines are written in 10 syllables. They have 5 beats or stresses per line, and every other syllable is stressed or emphasised. And if we look at the second line of Lady Macbeth's speech, we can see the impact of these rules. Firstly, it has exactly 10 syllables. And if you try reading it out loud, you should be able to hear every other syllable being brought more closely to our attention. That croaks the fatal entrance of Duncan. And this just simply means that the most important words in this line, croaks, fatal, entrance and Duncan, are emphasised. There was a belief at the time Shakespeare was writing that the evil spirits in the world attended closely to the thoughts of mortals, and that if you had an evil thought, you were pretty much inviting them in to take over your mind. The same idea is conveyed later in the passage by the spirits waiting on nature's mischief, literally lying in wait for nature to be disturbed in some way so that they can exploit the weakness. Rather than being a victim of some momentary weakness of thought, Lady Macbeth claims the power for herself and invites the evil spirits in, commanding them with the imperative verb, come. And you can see this same commanding tone throughout the speech, telling the evil spirits to bring about a set of physical changes to her body before addressing her commands to the knight as well. The first thing that she commands the spirits to do is to unsex her, and this means that she wants them to strip away her femininity, to take from her all the things which might make her, to an Elizabethan way of thinking at least, a weak woman. In a previous video I talked about the chain of being, which was an Elizabethan method for ordering the world and society, and from a human perspective determining a person's power and influence. All men appear higher in the chain than women. So by commanding the spirits to remove all that makes her a woman, she is asking for all her potential weaknesses to be removed in order to make her more powerful. It's as if she wants her whole being to be transmuted into a powerful force for evil. As a side note, it's interesting to look in this play at constructions of masculinity and femininity. Macbeth is manly because of his strength and bravery in battle, which begins the play. Lady Macbeth challenges his masculinity when she persuades him to murder Duncan in Act 1, Scene 7, and Macbeth employs the same persuasive device when convincing the murderers to take the life of Banquo in Act 3, Scene 1. The witches appear to be somewhere between masculinity and femininity. You should be women, and yet your beards forbid me to interpret that you are so, perhaps because their power and influence in the play outreaches that of a normal woman. The next thing Lady Macbeth demands of these spirits is that they make thick my blood, because thin, reedy blood, or bleeding generally, is another sign of weakness. The word compunctious here is to do with feelings of guilt or remorse, while fell is an adjective meaning evil or deadly. The sense of this line, then, is that Lady Macbeth wants the pathway to remorse, regret and sorrow to be closed off so that she does not feel these emotions and is therefore not prevented from carrying out her evil intentions. The next demand, which, as I pointed out before, begins with the imperative verb come, is probably the most shocking. I said before about Lady Macbeth wanting to have her femininity stripped away from her in order to feel more powerful, and here she identifies a specific aspect of her femininity, her breasts, and her ability to feed children through her milk. She's commanding the evil spirits to replace the milk with gall or poison, to effectively replace her ability to sustain the life of a baby with something more deadly. If you've read on in this play, then you'll probably remember that Lady Macbeth makes reference to breastfeeding a baby in Act 1, Scene 7. You may also remember Macduff in Act 4, Scene 3, saying about Macbeth, he has no children. The inference that we can draw from this is that the Macbeth did have a child, but that it died in infancy. Is this the reason why she becomes so hell-bent on her husband becoming king? To replace the disappointment of a lost child? Is this the reason for her rejection here of weak femininity, because her body could not sustain the life of her baby? These are, of course, questions to which there is no answer, and it's always a mistake to speculate outside of what the text provides as evidence. However, you do need to be able to make links to other areas of the play in your answer, and so links between images relating to Lady Macbeth's rejection of her maternal instincts in return for something powerfully destructive are useful. It may not be strictly relevant to the question we're looking at here, but since we're going through the extract, I'll point out that Lady Macbeth refers to the spirits she's calling out to using the nicely alliterative murdering ministers. And she calls out to them wherever they are. She cannot see them because they are sightless, which means invisible, but there was a belief that in order to have any influence on mankind, the spirits would need to take on a more physical form. In other words, to have substance. In the final part of this extract, Lady Macbeth calls out to the night, asking for it to be blacker and darker than any that have come before. And she does this using a couple of metaphors. A pall is a cover, usually a piece of cloth that's placed over the coffin at a funeral, and dun is a dull grey colour. This adjective is turned into the superlative dunnest. So the sense here is that Lady Macbeth is asking for a night so black that it will cover and conceal her actions like a dark funeral shroud or thick, hellish smoke. A night so dark that a sharp knife will not even be able to see the wound it makes, and heaven will be prevented from seeing her actions and from trying to stop her. And so we see the strength and power of this character being presented through her total determination to do anything in order to have Duncan murdered. I'm going to finish this video by showing you a short extract from an exam-style answer to this question and pick out where the assessment objectives are being met. So here it is. Lady Macbeth is presented throughout this extract as a powerful woman who is prepared to give herself over to the influence of evil spirits in order to carry out the murder of Duncan. She invites these spirits to come to her, and the repeated use of this imperative verb is used by Shakespeare to give the speech a commanding and powerful tone. At the time Shakespeare was writing, women would have been associated with more domestic roles such as motherhood, while within the context of the play, men are linked to more powerful roles such as leadership and battle. It's shocking to hear Lady Macbeth asking these spirits to, metaphorically, unsex her and to strip away these feminine qualities in order to become more masculine and therefore more powerful. So this is a fairly good opening. It's focused on answering the question and shows an awareness that Lady Macbeth is a character who's being presented in a certain way by a writer, Shakespeare. I've highlighted here how you can integrate or embed a quotation neatly into the sentence that you're writing, and this just helps the whole thing to flow much better. There are a couple of examples here of using technical vocabulary. I've identified an imperative verb and a metaphor. And I'm beginning here to do some analysis of these techniques and the impact that they have over the piece as a whole. And here I've linked the play to some historical context, the time that Shakespeare was writing and the sorts of beliefs that were held. Now, this paragraph is slightly artificial because I'm trying to illustrate how to hit the different assessment objectives, and you can see that I haven't at this point made any links to other areas of the play. You don't need to make a link to the part of the play with every point that you make, but the ones that I've identified here are the skills that the exam board wants to see, and so they need to appear regularly in your answer.